What is going on out there, and how the hell might y'all be making out? Thanks for tuning into the Crash Bang Boom podcast. It's been a while due to some life shit, as it were. But today I got a great guest and getting back into the groove of things in 2021 with Thrice's Riley Breckenridge. Riley and I were able to look back on the studio experiences of their records over the last 20 years, some of the more ridiculous shows juxtaposed with some of the greatest, as well as the injury that led him into drumming, and some of his favorite records of 2020. Definitely some killer ones. Dude's got good taste, what can I say? Back in the saddle, y'all. Shout out to my sponsors, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to release vinyl for your project, go on over to NewOrleansRecordPress.com for all your mastering, lacquer, cutting, design, and packaging options. They print both 12 and 7-inch records in both 120 and 180 gram variants, and they do small runs and larger runs up into the thousands. They can even turn around small runs quicker than most in the industry, so hit them up, and that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. Keep your eyes peeled for artists offering lessons, master classes, tutorials, and more during this downtime from touring. Bandcamp and merch purchases also can provide some help during these tough times. So without further ado, here we go. Riley Breckenridge, Thrice, Crash Bang Boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yes! Riley Breckenridge of Thrice, what is going on, man? How are you making out, buddy?
I am doing well, all things considered.
Yeah.
I think in COVID times, qualifying as like okay or fine should be upgraded to great, I guess.
Could be worse.
Things could always be a lot worse.
Absolutely, man. Well, I was just looking at it. Congrats on, at least on the recording front, 20 years of Thrice, which is awesome. It's hard enough to keep a band together for any time, much less 20 years. So congrats on hitting the 2-decade mark. That's insane, man.
Thanks, man. It's crazy. This was like all of our very first band.
Right.
So our entire musical development is kind of on recorded mediums of various forms.
Yeah.
So that's kind of embarrassing, but I don't know. It's wild. I mean, we just started with my brother and two of his friends who are younger than I am by about 4 or 5 years. And it was just something I was doing after work and they were doing after high school. And it evolved into a career, which I don't think any of us even came remotely close to seeing happening at any point.
Right.
So it's been a wild ride. It's had some ups and downs for sure, but I think we're in a pretty good spot right now.
Absolutely. Well, with Palms coming out in 2018, were there still touring plans that have been postponed that would have gone down in 2020, or any other band-related plans that were expected for 2020 that got postponed?
Not really. We lucked out. We did a full cycle on Palms, and then we snuck in a was it 10-year anniversary tour or 15-year anniversary tour for our album Visu.
Okay.
We did that. That started in like mid-January and ended on March 1st.
No way.
So we got home March 1st. And as a little decompress, the family and I went out to Big Bear to just kind of get away from everything.
Yeah.
And just get up in the mountains. And we're up in the mountains, and then slowly the world just started to fall apart and stop.
Oh, man.
And then we came back down the mountain and came to our home, and it was like, yeah, you can't go outside. You can't do this. You can't do anything.
Right.
And this thing is terrifying. And it's kind of snowballed into something greater than I think anybody really saw it being.
Of course.
But Thrice has been very fortunate because we didn't have a ton slated for this year. We had a few one-offs and like festivals and like a cruise that we were going to do with Coheed and Cambria and a bunch of other bands.
Mm-hmm.
But no like big touring plans. We were just supposed to be home and write. But it's been funny thinking about that Visu tour that we did and running into band friends or just friends that, from my childhood and stuff at different spots on the tour.
Sure.
And they're like, oh yeah, what are you doing after tour? And I was like, oh, we're going to be home for a little while. Ended up being indefinitely, but
yeah, right.
Yeah, we've been using this time to write our next record and just cope mostly,
Yeah, right.
which is kind of all you can do. But it's been good in a lot of ways and really scary in a lot of ways. And like I said earlier, like we could be in a much worse spot. So trying to think about being positive
Yeah.
through this whole thing, you know?
Absolutely. From looking at your Instagram, man, I dig the photos that you take and then post on there, taking runs and sort of coupled with the stories of what you were listening to on some of these runs and whatnot. Are there any particular records you've been digging especially hard since this all went down, or any particular records that have been in heavy rotation, either modern or old or whatever, that have been just the right time, right place, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. The Instagram stuff, like when I think about it from my perspective, it's a way to keep me accountable, to keep me in shape, and to get out and run. And it's nice to have like 40 minutes to an hour to get some exercise, kind of let my head float a little bit and not have to worry about kids and bills and COVID and everything else. Like
totally.
it's a nice decompress. Plus, it's a chance for me to listen to a lot of new music or old music that I have listened to in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I think about people looking at the photos, I'm like, oh, I'm taking a picture of the same shit every day. This must be really boring. But the plus side is that there's a music recommendation or like small review of a record attached to every post, which a lot of people have expressed is kind of cool. And it encourages me to keep doing it, which in turn encourages me to stay in shape both physically and mentally.
Right.
So it's ended up being a really cool thing, and I really enjoy it, even if the photos are boring. I'll have to figure out a new angle for next year.
Yeah, man.
This year, I would say there's a band called Heads. It's two guys from Germany, and then their singer is Australian. Fucking amazing band.
Okay.
It's like a nasty, heavy version of Failure.
Awesome.
Kind of. It's really sick. The record is recorded impeccably. The songs are amazing. It's heavy. It's dark. And I think if I had to pick like a favorite record for 2020, that was it. It was just soundtrack to this year.
Wow.
It just fit the mood right. Other records that I like this year, there's a band, I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation. It's Chiron Ersay, maybe. It's a Finnish prog like psych band.
Right.
And it kind of sounds like early Muse blended with maybe OK Computer, Radiohead.
Wow.
But it's got a heaviness to it.
Awesome.
Little Flaming Lips vibe in there, and
Cool.
then some weird tripped out kind of instrumental sections that are easy to get your head lost in.
Nice.
The Moses Sumney record, Gray, is incredible. It's like modern day Prince.
Wow.
The new Exhalants record, more nasty noise rock. Cloud Kicker, Solitude. I think that's got it covered. And then as far as old stuff that I go back to, it's always a lot of either like 80s metal, whether it's Metallica or Maiden.
Totally.
And then a lot of like late 90s to early 2000s Hydra Head stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like Botch.
Oh, yeah.
Cave In, Breach.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Lots of heavy, noisy stuff. That's kind of my bag.
I hear you, man. It sounds like you and I don't know how old you are, but I would imagine that we're pretty close in age. I, too, have that's a similar rotation. Although the new bands that you mentioned, I'll have to check those out, and the descriptions you gave definitely piqued my interest, as I'm not familiar with them. But we relocated out here to Utah, so I've been driving a lot. Like, I'm out kind of near the mountains and everything, and I've totally been rocking, like, like just a bunch of thrash and like 80s metal, and the same like early 2000s Hydra Head stuff, whether it's Botch or Cave In. Botch and Cave In have absolutely been in the rotation, as has Iron Maiden, which was one of your posts talking about listening to Power Slave, which is such a killer album that came out in '84. Oh, yeah. I was obsessed with that record. I had it on vinyl. I'm pretty sure I still have that original copy from my childhood. And when it came out in '84, I would have been 8 years old. But it was like magic. It was like sorcery. It was so good.
So sick. Everything about that band is incredible.
Yeah, man.
Speaking of Utah, two of my favorite heavy bands are from Utah: Cult Leader,
sure,
and The Ditch and the Delta.
I don't know them.
They're on my year-end list this year.
Okay.
It's kind of Cult Leader adjacent, like absurdly heavy, just amps that will peel the skin off your face, and then really bonkers drumming, like a bunch of mathy stuff. It's super cool.
Awesome. I will definitely have to check them out, man. Well, as a band that's been doing it for 2 decades, like what are some of the longer tours that y'all have done, and maybe some of the more amazing bands that y'all have played with along the way that you would reflect upon?
The first long tour we did, when I think back on it, we had no place being there because it was legit our first like 8-week run in the U.S. Mm-hmm. and it was the Plea for Peace Take Action tour. Mm-hmm. And on that bill, we had Cave In, Hot Water Music, mm-hmm. Alkaline Trio. Those were the big 3 to us. Strike Anywhere was on it for a little while. Mm-hmm. But we were so young and so impressionable. It's just so green. We had so much to learn.
Sure.
And to be around Alkaline Trio, to be around Hot Water Music, and be around Cave In. Cave In was like Jupiter era Cave In.
Right.
And they were absolutely fucking unbelievable.
Yeah,
like, I bet. And just being able to watch that every night as a young band and being like, okay, it was like watching Michael Jordan play basketball or something. Something
dude.
You're like, that's possible. Holy shit, do we have a long way to go if we want to be like a good band?
Right.
And the guys were so cool, and just learning a lot by watching them and picking their brains about stuff that they listened to, and pedals they were using. And I picked JR's brain about drums and probably annoyed him like crazy.
He's a sweetheart of a guy. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. And then with Hot Water Music, those dudes were so road tested, and they're a band that's been doing it for, I want to say, like 30 years.
Wow.
And they were really sweet to us and took us under their wing, and kind of taught us the ropes about touring. And I would imagine if we didn't do that tour, we would not still be playing.
Wow.
We'd be a band anymore. It was just so formative. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, we've toured with the Deftones a bunch.
Nice.
Which has been really cool because they're a huge influence. Sure. And Abe's one of my favorite drummers and is a fantastic human being. So nice.
Yeah, man.
And so enthusiastic about everything. Done a lot of touring with La Dispute, a really awesome band from Georgia called Oh Brother.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that there's a kinship there. When I listen to Thrice, I hear maybe a little bit of Sparta, a little bit of Oh Brother, and maybe like a dark kind of like space rock Failure type thing. If I was gonna say my take on what might be a holy trinity of sort of sounds within Thrice, I feel like those 3 are a band. So that's interesting that you said Oh Brother.
For sure. Who else have we done a lot of stuff with? We did a good amount of stuff with Thursday back in the day when major labels decided that they were gonna scoop up every band like Poison the Well and Thursday. Yep. And those kind of bands back in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate. We've toured with a lot of really great bands, and I can't really think of many tours at all that we've done, whether they're here or overseas, where we've been like, oh man, that sucked.
Right.
Or those guys were a bummer, or I didn't like that band. So
right. And I was going to ask you about drummers along the way, but it sounds like you just mentioned a couple, not the least of which, of course, is Abe Cunningham, who I've said, and I'll continue to reiterate it until the day that I'm gone, is that I feel like he's got the best pocket in heavy music. I don't know that there's a guy that has a better pocket than that guy in heavy music.
For sure. And it's pocket with a tremendous amount of intent. Like
Yes.
he beats the piss out of his drums.
He does.
And a lot of the times when you're watching a drummer and if a guy's really laying into stuff, there's a bunch of push and pull in the tempo and maybe the pocket isn't that solid. Maybe everything's a little bit ahead.
Mm-hmm.
With him, that pocket is so deep and he is absolutely beating the piss out of his drums.
Yeah.
And that's the way he's always played. And it's incredible to see him still going for it, you know, at that level. It seems like as dudes get older, they got to dial it back a bit.
Right.
But Abe's still going as hard as he ever did.
Yeah, that's a good distinction as well, because generally when I think about pocket players, it's more of a softer touch, but somehow to combine a laid-back feel coupled with somehow like total ferocity and bombast in your playing, that's a really hard balance to strike. So I don't even know how the hell he does it. It's crazy.
I don't either. He's a wizard, a legitimate wizard.
Yeah. Oh my God, man. Well, you mentioned shows in thinking about sort of the early years and some of the more ridiculous shows that you might have played juxtaposed with some of the shows where you're like, holy shit, it doesn't get much better than this. Maybe take me back to the early days if there were any particular shows that were fraught with technical difficulties or the crowds were terrible or the venue was shit or getting there was a nightmare or any of that. And then take me forward with maybe some of those shows where you are like, you know, holy moly, we just did that.
I've got two bad shows in mind. Maybe I'll skip the most recent one. I'll just say that it was in Madrid and it was at a club that was not ready for a rock show. So it was more on the, like, it wasn't on the actual playing the show side because the show itself was good. It was just everything it took to make the show happen.
Right.
Like I felt so shitty for our crew and everybody in the band was just like so spun out and exhausted that it was a nightmare. But there's one show in particular, I've mentioned it a few times in interviews and stuff, just because it's so burned into my memory.
Yeah.
It was like a panic dream that you have.
Uh-huh.
That's like super absurd, but it was happening in real life.
Right.
And so I think it was like 2004 or 5 maybe. We played K-Rock's Acoustic Christmas, and K-Rock is like the biggest radio station in Southern California, or was when radio was a thing. So it was like all these fucking gigantic bands, and we had a nightmare of a time getting to it. We were on tour with My Chemical Romance up in Canada, and we had like a bunch of flight delays and stuff, and like we missed our sound check and ended up racing from LAX to the venue to play this show. And there were, I think it was at Universal Amphitheater or something like that. I think it holds like in excess of like 5,000 people. So there's a shitload of people there. It's a big show. It's one of the biggest shows we've ever played. Plus it's live streaming on the radio.
Wow.
So yeah, it's got hundreds of thousands of people listening to this thing. Yeah. And we're playing the show and it seems like everything's going cool. And we decide to do an acoustic number. For some reason, the acoustic guitar is not going through the PA, so it sounded like our singer was doing an a cappella version of one of our singles.
Oh, wow.
And during that song, my brother and I kind of like snuck behind his bass rig, and we're just sitting there waiting for the singer to get through this acoustic song that had no guitar on it. And we're just looking at each other like, holy shit, is this really happening? Like, this sounds so bad. And our sound guy's like running down from front of the house and just like, holy shit, what's happening? I can't believe this. Like, this is such a mess. Then we had a string section come out, and the strings were not tuned to the proper notes for the song we were playing.
Oh boy.
So it sounded like this like grade school recital playing along one of our songs. And then we had Chino from Deftones come out and sing the end of one of our songs. And I honestly don't think he had listened to the song very many times. He was kind of doing his own thing, and it did not sound great. But it kept snowballing, like worse and worse and worse. And the whole time I'm playing, I'm just like, I just want this to be over. Like, can I just stop right now and walk backstage and cry? So it was a disaster.
Wow. Exceptional.
But, it can happen. It can happen anytime.
Absolutely.
And all the circumstances were pointing to everything we were going to attempt during this show. Everything was pointing to being a bad idea, and we decided to just fucking go with it anyway. And we ate that one. So
wow.
I still carry the scars of that one. So even if I have a bad show or anybody in the band has a bad show, it will never be as bad as that one.
Wow.
So,
all right.
It's some good perspective.
Yeah, right. What about some of the more recent shows or the last few tours or whatever that were particularly amazing?
Some of the craziest moments have been like at big festivals where we'll luck out and get like a main stage slot at like a Reading or Leeds or something like that. And just playing in front of this massive wall of people is terrifying and amazing at the same time. Like if you let yourself think about how many people are watching, it can crush you.
Yeah.
But if you just get lost in the moment and just kind of let things happen, it can be pretty surreal.
Right.
And I can't pick out like a particular club show really. Just kind of depends on the place and the vibe that you're getting from the crowd.
Right.
We had a show, we played a festival in France. I think it was a Download in France or something like that. 3 or 4 years ago. And we had never really played France before, and we expected absolutely nothing. And it was just amazing, like a ton of people, super enthusiastic. And those kind of shows, when you go into it thinking it's just going to be another show,
right,
when they end up being more than that, I think those are the ones that you really carry with you.
Absolutely, man. When I listen to those early records and I hear maybe more of a post-hardcore band, Such Was the Times, hence the Hydra Head records and some of the stuff we were talking about that was happening in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then I would say, within a couple albums, there was maybe a phase of more of like a punk vein and then maybe back to a little bit of post-hardcore. And then sort of the more recent phase that I was saying with maybe some of those influences that I had mentioned. And maybe that started, I'm not totally positive from my perspective, maybe around the Alchemy records, but would you attribute that shift to any particular reason? Was it a conscious decision? Did it just happen? Was it a byproduct of sort of the dynamic nature of doing the Alchemy records, if that was sort of a turning point for y'all, or what would you attribute that to?
I think the shift was twofold, kind of having a little bit more time to make records and experiment a little bit more, and also just growing up a little bit. I feel like when you're young, you attach so much of your identity to the music that you listen to. And we grew up listening to punk and hardcore and metal. So we were like, we're a punk metal hardcore hybrid kind of band, and that's what we do, and that's the scene that we want to be in, and that's just going to be our thing because that's who we are. But as you get older, you realize like it's okay to listen to other shit. Like if you like the Beatles, it's okay to incorporate some Beatles stuff. Like it's fine to listen to Radiohead if you only listen to like Cannibal Corpse or something like that. Like
Sure.
There's no shame in exploring other kinds of music. So as we got older, I think we just felt a bit freer to incorporate some of the influences that we had. And because we never really fit into one scene as we came up, I don't think we ever felt tied to one scene, so we weren't afraid of trying new things. I think the band kind of coalescing around Radiohead as a favorite band and almost like a lighthouse or something. I can't think of a better way to put it. Yeah,
beacon.
like it's like you can do that. You can't be as good as Radiohead, but you can try new shit. You can take a left turn with your career if you want to, and there's no shame in it. And maybe it'll work out and maybe it won't. But at the end of the day, if you take that chance and you feel good about it in your heart, wouldn't you rather go down swinging than just get swallowed up by feeling too tied to like a certain scene or getting label pressure to make the same record 10 times or something like that? So
Totally.
we made a decision, around Visu and the Alchemy Index. We're like, we're just gonna do what feels right to us, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't work, then at least we flamed out doing what we enjoy and what we're inspired by.
Mm-hmm. Well, that says something that you're willing to take those chances, and that the fans and new fans, I would imagine, were willing to sort of take that journey with you, as is certainly the case with in mentioning Radiohead. I mean, Radiohead did everything in their power, seemingly, to alienate fans, and it was just as if at that point they just got bigger and bigger. I would argue a band like Tool kind of did the same thing as well, in writing longer and longer songs, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the trajectory was a little bit different in sort of what they started to incorporate as the albums, transpired. But I think it's cool that y'all were able to do that and still do what you do and have people follow it and be willing to go there with you.
Yeah, we've been very, very fortunate in that regard. I think part of it is as it was happening, there was like a level of transparency with the band, where they knew that the music was coming from a good and honest place, and our fans were kind of growing up with us and exploring new music. I guess we had a certain number of fans that were like, the old shit is the best shit.
Of course.
Because, that's unavoidable.
Right.
But we've had such a large part of our fan base take the journey with us and just know that we're making stuff that is coming from a true and honest place, and thankfully they think it is good still.
Right.
But we're trying.
I hear you. It's funny you mentioned Cave In being sort of one of those influential bands early on, because if I would draw a comparison to sort of the trajectory of your career and the albums that you've put out, I would say Cave In is kind of similar in their willingness to take risks as well, maybe separate themselves. You know, early on, certainly you're hearing more of that like post-hardcore, late 90s, early 2000s stuff on those albums, and then it got more and more melodic and then spacey, and then came back, and they were always willing to go to different places. And me personally, I always enjoy that. I think that makes a career much more enjoyable. There's always bands that that from 20 years ago are still putting out the same records, and I'm sure there are fans that just love that consistency. Totally. And there's something to be said for that. But for me personally, I think I like the idea of switching it up for sure, especially just trying to put myself in a position of being in a band for 20 years for your own sanity and feeling as though that you're developing both as a human and as an artist and everything else. You would imagine that your music would reflect that, and I think that's something that you've done. You know, as I said, Cave In did it. I think Poison the Well, even on the last couple of records that they put out, you started to hear more and more of that being mixed up. So I think Thrice, Cave In, Poison the Well, some of those bands have really done some interesting things over the course. So you're in good company. Yeah,
that kind of harkens back to what I said about Cave In being so influential on that first long tour that we did in the U.S. Like, they were touring on Jupiter for all intents and purposes, and knowing that they had Until Your Heart Stops like in their bag ready to play, but just weren't playing it. They were just playing Jupiter stuff, and people were heckling, and they're just like, fuck you, like, we're gonna do what we want to do. Being able to watch that every night was like, you know what, you can do this. You can make the music that you want to make and play the music that you want to make, and people can come for the ride, like along for the ride, or they cannot, you know?
Yeah, right.
It's like okay to grow and experiment. So they were such a huge influence, and continue to be to this day.
I hear you, man. In writing the concept album, like the Alchemy volumes 1 through 4, I guess I could say, was it hard to make a record that's cohesive sonically and then chronologically with the story, but still, stick to a theme that tells that story over the course of the songs? Because I kind of had an experience recently where we were trying to sort of attach a theme over the course of a record, but the songs were already written. So then we were trying to do it lyrically, but then we realized the order of the songs that might make sense from the story point of view doesn't necessarily make the chronological sense as far as the record. So I realized at that point, like, if you're going to write a concept record, it has to start there, and I think you're better off, I would imagine, writing the songs around the story than trying to reverse engineer that, because it gets fucking messy. It was really hard to make sense of it. So was that a challenge, putting out those records? Because they're really cool and some really great sort of multi-instrumental, dynamic aspects to them for sure.
Oh, thanks, man. In retrospect, we probably should have named that project "How to Get Dropped by Your Major Label."
Yeah,
because we delivered that and they were like, what is this? Even though we told them what we were gonna do. Right. I think they were kind of holding out hope that they were gonna get some singles or something, and we gave them this art project, I guess, and
right.
that ended that relationship pretty quickly. But in a way, maybe that was kind of the point.
Sure.
I think, kind of hashing out the direction that you want to take stuff sonically, lyrically, conceptually, right out of the gate is super important.
Yeah.
And it did make things difficult. I mean, it was not an easy record to make, and it was a lot of songs, and we did it all at once, even though we released it in 2 batches. And it was a good experience, and I think it let us kind of stretch out a little bit and made coming back to making more traditional records a bit easier.
Right.
To compare it to like drumming or something like that, you take some time to really focus on your hands or your feet, or you're going to work on your odd meter or something. You set aside a chunk of time to really work on that. And then when you pull all those tools back together to just play drums and let stuff happen, you just feel a little bit more fluid with everything. So it was a good experiment. I'm not sure that we will do it again, or if we want to do it again.
Yeah.
If we do, it definitely will not be a double album kind of thing. But
yeah, man,
it was a good experiment. Much to our label's dismay.
Totally. Well, I know y'all have done varying charities, particular proceeds or whatever from the records. It goes to these charities. What are some of those charities, and have y'all done that for all 10 records that y'all put out?
No. The first label we signed to was Subsidy Records, which is like a subdivision of Hopeless Records. And their whole deal was having a portion of the record sales go to a charity of the band's choosing. And we had a choice when they offered us a contract. They're like, you can be on Hopeless or you can be on Subsidy. And we felt so fortunate to be able to start making music legitimately and to start touring and do that kind of stuff. We wanted to give back a little bit. So early on, we tried to choose some local charities in Southern California, whether it was like underprivileged kids or, like a music school for kids.
Yeah.
On The Artist in the Ambulance, we worked with a friend of our producer for that record with a breast cancer charity. He had lost his wife to breast cancer.
Wow.
It's Shirts for a Cure. So we worked with him. And as time has gone on, the charity thing has gotten a little messy to carry from label to label. So we'll choose charities that we want to work with, whether it's on like a T or like certain small releases or some kind of fundraising venture, but doing it with like a percentage of album sales and how that works into all the other math that goes into putting out records. As we've moved from label to label has gotten difficult.
I bet.
So now we're just kind of picking and choosing when we can dive into that. Like we just did a t-shirt for a local venue here called Chain Reaction that's been just smashed because of COVID. They're running out of money, and we made a t-shirt to help them out, and it looks like they're going to be a couple of other local bands did that as well.
Super cool.
And it looks like they're going to be able to stay alive for a bit longer.
Nice.
But yeah, just now it's just picking very focused, direct ways to do that rather than getting the label involved.
Right. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Congrats on doing that. So I was thinking, as an only child, I'm always fascinated by not only siblings and sibling rivalry, sibling relationships, etc., but especially siblings that join a band together. So, and I mean, I was also, of course, thinking just about brother or sister bands, even. I mean, it's pretty wild when you think about the chemistry that happens from everything from Pantera, Gojira, Van Halen, AC/DC, Black Crowes, Heart, Jackson 5, Isley Brothers, the Bee Gees. It keeps going. The Pointer Sisters. You name it.
Whoa. Yeah.
It's a whole lot of them, man. But what were some of the bands or records that maybe you and your brother grew up listening to that might have piqued your interest in rock? Or was there one, or did y'all kind of lead separate lives and et cetera? How'd that work out?
No, our journey kind of moved in lockstep. Early Metallica stuff, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All,
Oh, yeah.
Ride the Lightning. Those were in heavy rotation. On a little boombox in either of our rooms. Nirvana, Bleach. I think some of the early skate punk. My brother's a pretty avid skater.
Okay.
So he would end up introducing me to. He's younger than me. He would end up introducing me to a bunch of punk bands from these skate videos that he'd watch.
Oh yeah.
So it was like Bad Religion, Pennywise, a lot of the Fat and Epitaph stuff at the time. Yeah, a lot of the punk metal stuff. Sepultura.
Oh yeah. Another brother band, by the way.
Yeah.
There's another one.
Maiden.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of came together over the punk and metal stuff, and then that slowly evolved into getting more into Orange County hardcore stuff. Because I was like a hip hop and R&B guy in high school, and maybe a little bit of classic rock. So he kind of pulled me into more of the rock world.
Interesting.
And then I've been obsessed ever since.
Tell me about your first gig that you played, and I guess how long had you been playing drums at that point? And I guess even prior to that, how old were you when you got your first kit?
I was 18 when I got my first kit. I was all about sports growing up, and we had a lot of music on in the house, like Zeppelin and the Beatles, and my dad was a huge jazz guy, so
nice.
Miles Davis and Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that was present in the house, but I was so obsessed with like baseball
yeah.
that I didn't really care. I hurt my knee really bad. I had a major surgery. Like I basically tore every ligament in my right knee.
Oh, damn.
And couldn't play sports my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
So to pass the time, I got a drum kit and started tapping around on that thing. And then some friends of mine in high school bought instruments as well, and we started a shitty high school band.
Wow.
So those were like my first shows were with my high school buddies. And Thrice didn't end up forming until 98. So 5 or 6 years later. I had already gone away to school for a little while, stopped playing drums. I was playing baseball in college. I got back into the sports thing and kind of rode that out for as long as I could until I realized I was too bad at baseball and too small to play it outside of college. So I came back, and my brother had a buddy, Tepe, our guitarist, that he was skating with a bunch. And Tepe had a buddy named Dustin, who was our singer and guitarist, and they wanted to start a band. And my brother was like, "Oh, my brother used to play drums in a band in high school. Like he can play with us."
Wow.
Until we find somebody, and they haven't found anybody yet.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's wild. And on your very first gig, was your brother a part of that? Did y'all play together?
I don't even know if he was there. We probably just played some stupid high school party or something.
Right.
Butchered some Rush covers and Pearl Jam covers and stuff like that.
Right, of course.
Some horrible, like, we would really like to be No Effects or Bad Religion songs too.
Yeah, man.
That was the high school journey, just trying to play other people's songs.
Yep.
And then playing a couple originals that sounded exactly like the
Those
songs that you were covering. Yeah.
Totally. I know. I think about the same thing on our first few gigs or whatever with my first band. It was like we had 2 Helmet covers in the set, and then the other stuff, of course, still probably sounded mostly like Helmet. And then when it didn't sound like that, because again, this is like the early, mid 90s, no later than like, it was like 93, 94, maybe. It was like a Primus, Helmet, and occasionally Voivod got thrown in there, and we like attempted a Voivod cover. And I actually dug up a video of it a while back, and I was like, man, I'm not even certain. I know we thought we were playing that song, but I'm not certain that we were actually playing the song. We told people we were playing the song, and not that any of the other nerds that were in the crowd necessarily knew about Voivod, right. So I don't know that they knew any different, but we said we played it, but it didn't quite sound like we were actually playing it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I remember writing with that high school band, and we'd be like, oh, man, yeah, this part's cool. Kind of sounds like Rush. And then you listen back to it, and it's like, yeah, it's a really shitty version of part of Spirit of Radio. That's exactly what it is. It's the same chord progression, and then somebody that sounds like they're playing the arpeggio with like a fucking egg beater or something. Like, sounds great.
Right. Oh my God, that's funny, dude. When you think about some of the producers that you've worked with over the years, were there any really sort of amazing moments and subsequent lessons learned from working with some of those producers, and potentially super like tough moments and tracking, for any of those records?
We did 2 records with Brian McTernan, who's done Cave-In Records and too many records to count. Hot Water Music, Strike Anywhere.
Yeah.
He produced for like 20 years or whatever, but he did The Illusion of Safety and then The Artist in the Ambulance, and just helped us so much with like gear and playing and dynamics and songwriting and in-studio performance and stuff like that. Just kind of hammering that stuff into our heads when we were young and impressionable was invaluable. I think the making of The Artist in the Ambulance was very stressful. It was our first major label record, and it was Brian's first major label production. So we were all super stressed out, and we got label people in the studio occasionally listening to stuff, and we recorded at Bearsville Studio in New York, which is like a legendary studio that a ton of huge bands and amazing records have come out of, and we're just a bunch of dorks from Southern California that are like in their early 20s.
Wow.
It just felt weird, and the pressure was crazy.
Yeah, I bet.
Then for Visu, we worked with Steve Osborne, who's a British guy who has worked with like the Doves and U2 and Katie Tunstall. It was kind of a left turn for us, but that was the point. We wanted to do something different, and we brought a guy in who didn't really work with heavier bands or aggressive bands at all. And he taught us a ton about just like sound manipulation and pedals and tape delays, and performance-wise for me, really hammered home dynamic playing, because he was a much more groove-based, like he was super anti-fill and anti-loud playing, and I didn't really understand that.
Of course,
I had come up just trying to beat the crap out of everything.
Yeah.
And we self-produced a few records. More recently, we worked with Eric Palmquist, who's a local guy that's kind of done more indie stuff, because we wanted to get pushed a little bit in a different direction. But we've never really had a bad experience in the studio with a producer. when we were on a major label, we did have some really sketchy meetings with like big name producer people.
Oh, I bet.
You could tell, like, they're like, oh, yeah, come on in here and we'll put you in the chop shop and we'll just shit out a record that is like major label standard. It didn't seem like there was a lot of room for creativity or experimentation, which is something that I think keeps our band alive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the Hollywood producer type that you hear about in documentaries and stuff like that, where they've got a thing that they do, and it doesn't matter if you're Slayer or if you're Fall Out Boy, they're going to put you through the same plugins and the same gridded chop shop for the drums and same filters for the vocals and all this stuff. Like, they have a way of doing something, and that never appealed to us. But
Yeah.
the meetings were interesting.
Oh, I bet they were, man. That's awesome that you got an insight into the machine, and now having had some of those conversations, I bet you have a different perspective on hearing some of the template music that can be put out there in the world. I would imagine your perspective of that is especially interesting, knowing what you know. You know.
Yeah, we're like that. Let's not do that ever.
Right. Oh my God, man. Has there been an evolution of gear on your behalf? And some of that can be tied into, eradicating pain can be a good catalyst for change of technique or setup or analyzing ergonomic movements, etc. But has your gear and or setup sort of changed over the last 20 years?
Yeah, for sure. When I started out, most of my drumming influences were in the punk community, so it was like smaller drums, smaller cymbals for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like 22 kick and like a 12-inch rack and like a 16-inch floor, and then the cymbals are all kind of in the 16 to 20 range.
Uh-huh.
Then I guess kind of around Visu, like 2005-ish, I went into a real big Bonham phase and decided that I was just going to go big for everything. So now everything is bigger.
Yeah.
Big cymbals, big drums. Kind of around that time, I don't know if it was gear related or just fate, but I hurt my back really bad and couldn't play drums for a while.
Oh.
And kind of had to rethink my posture and my playing and the ergonomics of my kit.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to pay more attention to that. Trying to bring stuff in a little bit closer, not having to work so hard. It's an ongoing struggle. Like, I just have a way that I learned how to play when I was younger, and it's so hard for me to unlearn that, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
And then recently, I would say post hiatus, we took a hiatus from like 2012 to 2015 or 16, a brief one. And I linked up with the guys at Q Drums.
I love their drums.
Amazing drums.
God, they sound so good.
Every single time I get something from them, I'm like, how is this better than the last thing I just got?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a mahogany kit from them that I love, and I have a galvanized steel kit from them. It's just insane.
Oh, man.
And then the snare drums that they make are legit my favorite drums I've ever played.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then I, in keeping in line with that, trying to figure out better ergonomics and stay healthy, I took a lesson with Dave Elich.
Of course, yeah, man.
And then bought his video series. I haven't been up to see him because we toured a bunch, and then COVID happened. Mm-hmm. But just one lesson with him, and then following up by watching those videos has given me so much to work on. And I'm starting to feel it creep in, and I'm starting to feel better, and starting to understand like how the instrument is supposed to work and how my body is supposed to work with it. Mm-hmm. And it's total game changer. I cannot recommend it any higher. Like, it's unbelievable. And
That's
it's
awesome.
it's going to be something that I'm chasing for the rest of my life for sure, because I've got a lot to unlearn, but it's been such a game changer for me. I can't overstate how important it's been.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny you mentioned him. I'm hoping to talk to him sometime in the next few months. I've always been a fan of him, and I know that he's got that video series that you're talking about, and people have really been raving about it. I actually, one of the guys that I interviewed previously, JP Bavay, he on his website he does like little installations of videos you can purchase, et cetera. And one of them is kind of it's a Buddy Rich flow mode, and I've kind of been obsessed with Buddy and sort of trying to figure out decode what the hell it was that he was doing, because even seeing it, I'm like, how is it even still possible?
That's
but
just a blur.
yeah. But JP's got a really cool video series sort of analyzing that and just sort of some stickings around the kit over the course of like 14 videos that you can go through to sort of develop that and hopefully get it to where it's embedded enough to where you can sort of improvise within that sort of Buddy-esque context. So that's the one that I'm working on right now. And the same thing you said, I was like, I've already been chasing this Buddy thing for a strong decade plus. Now I've got this stuff, and now I'm like, all right, this is a whole nother level. Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, watching those old Buddy videos is like watching a hummingbird flap its wings. Like, you're just like,
it's so crazy.
I know something amazing is happening right now, but I cannot understand. I cannot see it. I can't pick it apart.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Unbelievable, man. Well, one thing I know we talked about all these different recordings over the course of the years. Do you have a particular recording that is your favorite drum recording of all those?
It's tough.
I
to
bet.
pick.
I mean, they're all a little different. Obviously early on it's more raw than you get more recently with the last record, a little more produced, and then then some of the stuff it goes from big kind of room sounds. It's all over the place. So I didn't know if you had a particular favorite one thus far.
Yeah. Still chasing like my favorite.
Right. I hear you. That's the best answer.
Definitely none of the early records.
Right.
Artist of the Ambulance is so chopped up and gross that I can't even listen to it anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That was like a mixing thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the way the mixer mixes.
Right.
Probably Visu. Visu is one of my favorite records.
Okay.
Playing wise and sound wise.
Mm-hmm.
I think to be everywhere is to be nowhere.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite performances.
Great drum sounds on that, man, for sure.
Yeah, I was super stoked on that. The Palms has some really cool songs.
Definitely.
There's a lot of stuff going on mix wise, not so much from like a gridding or chopping standpoint, but more from like an effect standpoint that I'm not like totally stoked on. I do like a lot of it, but we recorded it in a super nice studio, and it doesn't really sound like that room, which is slightly disappointing, but I think the record sounds cool and sounds good, so that's all right. And it's never going to be perfect. It's like making a record.
Of course.
Like, you do it at the time that you're supposed to do it, and it comes out, and in hindsight it could always be better, but it's never going to be exactly what there's always going to be something that you could have tweaked to make it a little bit better, whether it's on the playing side or the mixing side or whatever else. So it's part of the joy. You enjoy the struggle and enjoy chasing that perfect sounding record, or it can drive you insane.
Yeah, I bet. Well, for 2021, man, is it just kind of a wait and see? Are there any plans on the agenda, or is it still a lot of stuff being put in motion and then figuring it out as you go?
It's a lot of figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, I bet.
We're writing a record or records, or I don't even know. We're just writing a lot of stuff very slowly, but I think that's kind of a symptom of just the way things are right now.
Yeah.
And then on the touring side, provided we can finish a record, we're hoping to tour at some point next year, maybe.
Right.
But we were supposed to come home from that tour that we finished at the beginning of this year, and then we were hoping to put out a record like in a couple months from right now.
Yeah.
And then tour on it, but that's not going to happen.
Right.
So we've kind of been tentatively booking a tour and then going, oh, actually, no, we can't do that. Let's push it back a few months. And then, oh, no, we got to push it back another few months. And then we kind of have a slot that we're hoping to tour in next year, but who knows, man.
Totally. Oh,
The numbers are not heading in the right direction for that.
yeah. Oh, God.
No vaccine. Yeah.
Oh man, crazy town, crazy world. Well, man, Riley, it was fun talking to you, man. Appreciate you walking me through all these records and the processes, and just the history over the last 20 years, and new records that I didn't know about, and all that good stuff. So it was fun talking to you.
My pleasure, man. It was super fun. I've been a long time listener. You've had some of my favorite drummers on the podcast. So when you hit me up, I was like, oh my God, yeah. Hell yeah, I'll do this.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Very cool. All right, man. Well, we'll catch up soon, buddy.
Yeah. Be safe. Be well.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Riley for rapping. Definitely a good time revisiting those records and just a 20-year history of a band that's still doing it. Gotta respect that. Also dug some of those records that he's been digging. I've been digging them myself. We'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.